In a small town in Ohio, I never imagined my son's words would cut so deep. I was about to lose everything I thought I could count on. I never thought I'd be in this position. At 68 years old, I'd seen my share of hardships, but I had also built something I could be proud of: my home, my family, my legacy. My name was on the deed of the house I built with my own 2 hands. I thought my son Ben and I had a bond that could withstand anything. I was wrong. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, staring out at the front yard, where the maple tree I planted when Ben was born still stood tall. The tree had grown along with him, thickening with age, just like me. We'd shared so many memories in that yard: Christmas mornings, summer evenings, and endless talks about life, his future and mine. I always thought we'd grow old together in this house, with my son and his family nearby, watching my grandchildren run around just as Ben had once done. But today, the life I knew was shattering. It started with a conversation, or rather, a command, from Ben. He and his wife, Clara, had been acting distant lately, but I thought it was just the usual bustle of family life. They were busy with work and the kids. They didn't have time to visit much anymore, and when they did, it felt awkward, like something unsaid hung between us. But I never expected this. It was a Sunday afternoon. The house was quiet, the kids playing in their rooms, and Ben and Clara had just come back from church. We'd planned to have dinner together. I thought it would be just another peaceful Sunday, but Ben didn't sit down at the table with the rest of us. He stood in the doorway of the living room, looking uncomfortable, almost distant. "Dad," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." I didn't think much of it at first. I figured he was just stressed about work, or something with the kids. But when he walked into the living room, I saw it in his eyes. Something was different. He wasn't the son I knew anymore. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. "Is everything all right, son?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was beginning to race. Ben glanced over at Clara, who was standing just behind him, her arms crossed, her eyes avoiding mine. She looked tense, her lips pressed into a thin line. That was when I realized, whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be good. "Dad," Ben said, his voice wavering slightly, "Clara and I have been talking, and, well, we've decided it's time for you to move out." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, not sure I'd heard him right. "What do you mean, move out?" I asked, my voice thick with confusion. "I've lived here for years. This is my home." Ben's face hardened. "It's just not working anymore. You're getting older, and it's been harder for Clara and me to manage everything with you here. We've been trying to be patient, but we've talked about it, and this is what we've decided." I felt the world slip out from under me. "What are you talking about? This is my house. I built it. I raised you here. You're telling me to leave my own home?" Clara stepped forward, her voice cold, not a hint of empathy. "It's not that simple, Jack. You're not a burden, but it's become too much for us. We need space. We need to move forward." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ben, my own son, telling me I wasn't welcome anymore, and Clara, standing there, supporting him as if she had a right to decide what was best for me. "Ben, please, what happened? We've been through so much together. This house, it's where I raised you, where your kids are growing up. You can't just throw me out." Ben turned away from me, unable to meet my eyes. "It's not just about the house, Dad. It's about everything. We've been trying to make it work, but it's not. We think it's time for you to go, for your sake, for everyone's sake." The words stung, each one deeper than the last. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't know what to say. The room felt cold, even though it was warm outside. My mind raced, but I couldn't form a coherent thought. I couldn't process the betrayal. "You don't have to do this," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. But it was no use. The decision had been made. Clara didn't even look at me as she spoke. "We've already looked at options for you. You'll be fine. You've lived a full life. It's time to move on. Move on," I repeated, my voice breaking. "What the hell does that even mean?" Ben turned back toward me, his face strained, his jaw clenched. "Dad, it's not easy for me either. But you have to understand, this is what's best. We've been discussing this for a while now. It's the right thing to do." I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't breathe. My own son, the person I had given everything for, was telling me to leave. "I'm not leaving," I said, more to myself than to them. "I won't." But it didn't matter. They had made their decision, and there was nothing I could do to change it. I wanted to scream, to demand they see the pain they were causing me, but the words wouldn't come. I was too stunned, to hurt. Clara stood there, arms still crossed, watching me like I was an inconvenience. The woman I had welcomed into my family, the woman who had married my son, had just sealed my fate. She didn't care about the history we shared, the years of family dinners, the holidays, the laughter. None of it mattered. "Dad, please, it's for the best," Ben said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. But it wasn't enough. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He had already made up his mind. And that was it. The world around me felt like it was spinning, and I was standing still in the middle of it. My heart was heavy with disbelief. I had no idea how I was going to leave, how I was going to walk out of the house I had worked so hard to make a home. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going down without a fight. Not yet. After Ben and Clara's announcement, I was in a daze for days. It was hard to wrap my mind around the idea that they wanted me gone. The house I had built with my own hands, the place where I had watched my son grow up, and now where my grandchildren played, was suddenly no longer mine. I couldn't shake the sting of their words, especially Ben's, but there was no time to dwell on the pain. I needed to do something. I went up to the attic the morning after the confrontation. I wasn't sure why I felt drawn there, but I did. The attic had always been a place for memories, old family photos, boxes of letters, keepsakes from a lifetime of experiences. It was where I stored the past. A past that Ben and Clara seemed to have discarded without a second thought. As I climbed the creaky stairs, I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on me. The wooden floorboards groaned under my weight, and the air was thick with dust. But there was something else up there, something I had never noticed before. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find something, anything. The boxes were stacked high, some of them taped up and marked with faded labels. I moved carefully, trying not to disturb too much, but a particular box caught my eye. It wasn't one of the usual ones I had stored up there. It was small, barely noticeable among the others, but something about it felt different. It was an old wooden box, carved with intricate designs that I hadn't seen in years. I knelt down, my knees creaking as I lifted the box. It was heavier than I expected, and the weight seemed to mirror the heaviness in my heart. I opened it slowly, not sure what I was expecting to find. Inside, I saw a stack of old papers, and beneath them, something that made my breath catch, a faded envelope with my name written on it in my mother's handwriting. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to hold something from her. She had passed away when I was in my early 40s, but I could still remember her handwriting, her gentle words. I had kept a lot of her letters and notes over the years, but this one was different. I had never seen it before. I carefully opened the envelope, unfolding the delicate paper inside. It was a letter from my mother, written to me when I was in my 20s, just before she passed. The letter was brief, but the words were powerful. "Jack, I know life is going to be hard for you after I'm gone, but I want you to know that the house, everything we've built, is yours. No one can take it from you, no matter what happens. It's meant to stay in the family, to be a place of refuge. Hold on to it, Jack. It will give you the strength you need when things get difficult." I felt the room spin around me as I reread the letter. I had never known this letter existed. My mother had left me something far more important than just words. She had left me a legal document, a promise that I would never be forced out of this house, a promise that was now more valuable than ever. But there was more. Beneath the letter, I found a deed, an old yellowed document that looked like it hadn't seen the light of day in decades. As I carefully unfolded it, my eyes widened. It was a legal deed for the house, signed by my mother and my late father. The clause inside was clear. If anything ever happened to me, or if the house was ever contested, it would remain in my hands, with specific protections in place to ensure no one could force me out. I had never known about this clause. My parents had kept it hidden, but they had made sure that I would be protected. This was the safety net I hadn't even known I needed. I sat back, my heart racing. This was it. This was the key to everything. The house, my home, was legally mine, and no one, not even Ben or Clara, could take it from me without going through a long legal battle. But with this discovery came a new realization. Using this clause would put me at odds with my son. If I pushed for this, if I fought to keep the house, it would destroy any chance of reconciliation. It would tear our family apart. But how could I just let them take everything I had worked for? I stood up, holding the documents in my hands, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my shoulders. I knew what I had to do, but the cost of winning this fight, of holding on to what was mine, was something I wasn't sure I was ready to face start. As I made my way back downstairs, I could hear the faint sounds of Clara and the kids in the living room. They were going on with their day as if nothing had changed, as if I wasn't sitting in the house, holding on to the past with nothing but a few pieces of paper. But everything had changed, and soon they would know it too. The weight of the papers in my hands felt heavier than ever as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents that would decide everything. The deed, the clause, my mother's letter, all of it had been hidden away for so long, and now it was in my hands, a piece of family history that could either protect me or destroy what little was left of my family. I hadn't spoken to Ben or Clara since the conversation. They were busy with the kids, with their lives, and I was left to process everything alone. I knew I couldn't sit on this knowledge forever. The letter from my mother had been clear. The house was meant to stay in the family, to provide shelter, to be a place of refuge, but that didn't mean it was going to be easy to keep it. If I went to them with this, they would never understand. They would see me as someone who was holding them hostage to a house, someone who was unwilling to let go. I thought about Clara's cold, dismissive face when she told me to leave. I thought about how Ben had stood beside her, saying nothing to defend me. He hadn't even looked at me when he said it, like I wasn't even his father anymore. All these years, I had worked for him, raised him, tried to be the father he needed, and now he was rejecting me. I couldn't just let that go. I couldn't just leave, but at what cost? I stared at the documents again. The clause in the deed was ironclad. If I took this to court, I had a strong case. The law was on my side, and Ben and Clara would have a hard time contesting it. But there was something else I had to consider: my relationship with Ben. If I fought this battle, it would destroy any chance of reconciliation. I would lose my son. The thought of that, of pushing him away forever, made my stomach turn. The clock ticked on, and I didn't move. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. The house felt different now, colder. The walls that had once been filled with laughter, warmth, and family memories now seemed oppressive, like they were closing in on me. It wasn't just the house I was fighting for anymore. It was my dignity, my right to be heard, my right to not be cast aside by the very people I had given everything to. But at what cost? The sound of the front door opening pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced up to see Clara walking into the kitchen, her expression guarded. She looked at me for a moment, then quickly looked away, as though she didn't want to see me. It was a simple gesture, but it stung more than anything. "I'm making dinner," she said, her voice cool but not unkind. "The kids are hungry." I nodded, unsure of what to say. I had so much on my mind, so much I wanted to ask her, to demand of her, but the words wouldn't come. We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the refrigerator. "Clara," I began, my voice unsteady, "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't look at me when she spoke, but her voice had a hardness to it. "We've talked about this, Jack. It's for the best." I clenched my fists on the table, fighting the surge of frustration that bubbled up inside me. "You can't just make me disappear, Clara. This is my home. I built it. I raised Ben here. You can't just decide I'm not welcome anymore." Clara's shoulders tensed, and she finally turned to face me. "You're not a burden, Jack," she said, her voice low, almost cold. "But things aren't the same anymore. Ben and I have a family now. We can't keep living like this." I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the confrontation I'd been avoiding. The truth that had been simmering for so long was finally coming to the surface. "You're telling me to leave because you want this house for yourselves," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "This isn't about me being a burden. It's about control. It's about you and Ben wanting more space, more freedom without me." Clara's face softened, just slightly, but there was no apology in her eyes. "We didn't ask for this. We didn't want things to be this way, Jack. But it's time. You have to accept that." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. I couldn't sit here anymore, not with her looking at me like that, not with her trying to justify what they were doing. I had to leave, to think, to figure out what I was going to do next. I walked out of the kitchen, feeling the weight of the house pressing in on me, as if it were no longer a home, but a prison. I couldn't let them take it from me. I couldn't let them take everything I had worked for. But how could I fight Ben? How could I fight my son? The answer was simple. I had to. For myself, for my dignity, and for everything I had given up to build this life. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. The hardest part was still ahead. I had the legal documents, the clause that would protect me, but I wasn't sure if that was enough to fix what was broken. I knew the fight wasn't going to be easy, but once I made the decision to stand my ground, there was no turning back. The following morning, I woke up early. Before the house came alive with the sounds of daily life, the kids were still asleep, and Clara and Ben were probably in their room, getting ready for the day. I couldn't face them just yet. Instead, I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the yard, my mind racing. The weight of my decision hung heavily on me, but there was no escaping it. The house was mine. The clause in the deed made that clear, and now I had to decide how to use that power. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to rip apart the family I had built, but I also couldn't let Clara and Ben push me out, especially not when I had a right to stay. The truth was, I felt betrayed. All those years of sacrifice, of doing everything I could to provide for Ben, to make sure he had a good life, and now this. Clara had taken his side, had manipulated him. I was sure of it. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me, but I didn't know how to start. I thought about calling a lawyer, about moving forward with the legal process. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to talk to Ben first. I had to give him one chance to make things right before I took this to court. If I fought them, if I went to the lawyer, it would be the end of everything. The house, the family, everything I held dear would be gone. With a heavy heart, I made my decision. I would talk to Ben. I would try to reason with him, to show him that this wasn't just about the house, it was about family. If he was willing to listen, then maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. But if he refused to hear me out, then I would have no choice but to take the next step. I went upstairs and knocked lightly on Ben's bedroom door. The kids were up now, their voices drifting through the walls, but the house was still quieter than usual. I waited for a moment, and when there was no answer, I knocked again, a little louder this time. Ben, I called softly. I need to talk to you. A few seconds passed, and then I heard the sound of footsteps from inside the room. The door opened just a crack, and Ben's face appeared, looking tired and worn. He hadn't shaved, and his eyes were heavy, like he hadn't slept much. "Dad," he said, his voice low. "What is it? We've already talked about this. I don't know what else you want me to say. I just need a moment, Ben," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Please, can we talk?" Ben hesitated for a moment before stepping aside and letting me in. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I walked past him, sitting down on the edge of the bed. Ben closed the door behind me, but he didn't sit down. He stood there, waiting for me to speak, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. "I know you and Clara have made your decision," I began, trying to steady my voice, "but I need you to understand something. This isn't just about me being a burden. I've lived here for years, Ben. This house, it's everything to me. It's not just for walls. It's a lifetime of memories." "I know, Dad," Ben said, his voice tight, though I could hear the struggle in it. "I get it, but things change. We're a family now, and we need space. You don't understand how hard it is for Clara and me to manage everything. We've got the kids, and work, and I do understand." "Ben, I understand more than you think," I said, my voice growing stronger. "But what you don't understand is that I've worked my whole life for this house, for our family. I didn't just build this place with bricks and wood. I built it with my heart, with my sweat. It's not just a house, it's a legacy. And you're telling me to walk away from it?" Ben's expression softened, but just for a moment. "Dad, it's not like that," he said quietly. "It's just, we need to move on. Things can't stay the way they are forever. I can't keep being the one who has to make all the decisions. It's too much." "I'm not asking you to make decisions for me, Ben," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm asking you to see what you're doing. You're pushing me out, and I'm not just going to disappear. I built this house with my own hands. I raised you here. Don't you owe me that much? Don't you owe me the chance to stay here?" Ben looked away, his eyes shifting toward the floor. I could see the conflict in his face, but there was something else there too, something deeper. He wasn't just torn between me and Clara, he was torn between the past and the future, between the family he grew up with and the life he was trying to build with his own family. "I didn't want it to come to this," Ben said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you, Dad, but I don't know how to fix this." I stood up then, the frustration boiling over. "You can fix this, Ben. We can fix this. But you have to want to. You have to see what's really happening. If you and Clara keep pushing me, if you keep treating me like I'm nothing, then this is going to tear us apart." It doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to throw everything away. Ben didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders slumped. The silence between us grew thick, uncomfortable. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to do. My son was slipping away, and I didn't know how to bring him back. I'm not leaving, I said quietly, my voice steady. I'll fight for this house. I'll fight for my place in this family. Ben didn't say anything in response. He just turned away from me, his face hidden in the shadows. And in that moment, I knew the battle was just beginning. The decision to fight for the house felt inevitable, but as the days passed, I began to see the cost more clearly. My family was slipping further away. The days after my conversation with Ben were heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the shift, the gap growing wider between us. The tension in the house was palpable. Every time I walked into a room, I felt it. Ben and Clara's silent disapproval, their subtle distance, but I had made my choice. I wasn't leaving. I contacted a lawyer the very next day. The man's name was Greg Harper, a family attorney I had known for years. He was a quiet, no-nonsense type of guy, and his reputation in town was solid. I didn't want to drag this out, but I knew I didn't have much choice. If I wanted to stay, I had to fight. The consultation went as I expected. Greg didn't mince words. "Jack, you've got a solid case," he said, leaning back in his chair as I sat across from him in his small office. The walls were lined with legal books, and the faint smell of old paper filled the air. "This deed clause you've found, it's ironclad. Your son and daughter-in-law can't just throw you out, not legally. But the emotional side of things, that's going to be tricky." I nodded, trying to absorb what he was saying. "I don't care about emotions right now, Greg. I just want to stay in my home." "Understood," he replied, nodding. "I'll file the paperwork to initiate the process, but be prepared it won't be quick. These things take time. You'll likely have to go to court." "Do what you need to do," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." As I left Greg's office, a part of me felt a strange sense of relief. I had taken the first step, but as I walked back to my car, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I had just signed the first papers in what was sure to be a long, painful legal battle, and I knew one thing for certain. Even if I won, I would lose. That night, I sat in my usual spot by the window, staring out at the front yard. The lights from the street lamp flickered in the distance, casting shadows over the lawn. The world outside looked peaceful, untouched by the storm that was brewing inside the house. But the storm was coming. Clara and Ben hadn't spoken to me much after our confrontation. Clara especially seemed cold and distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was waiting for me to give up, waiting for me to back down. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to lose everything I had built. The next few days were filled with tense silences. Ben avoided me as much as he could. Clara was civil, but only just. The kids were too young to understand the weight of the situation, but I could see the unease in their eyes. They didn't know what was happening, but they could feel the change. One evening, after dinner, I found Clara in the living room, sitting by herself, staring at her phone. I hadn't spoken to her directly since our last conversation, but tonight, something in me made me want to try again. "Clara," I said softly, standing in the doorway, "can we talk?" She didn't look up at first, but I could see her stiffen when she heard my voice. After a long pause, she set her phone down and turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see the faintest hint of exhaustion in her eyes. "What is it, Jack?" she asked, her tone neutral. "I know this is hard," I began, my voice hesitant, but I pushed forward. "But we need to figure this out. This isn't just about me, it's about the whole family. We're tearing apart at the seams, and I don't think either of us wants that." Clara sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's not that simple," she said, rubbing her temples. "Ben and I have tried, Jack. We've tried to be patient, to make this work. But you're not getting it. This isn't just about a house, it's about our future. You don't see how much this is affecting everything." "I do see it," I said, my frustration beginning to rise. "I see it more than you think. But you're not seeing the bigger picture, Clara. This house, this place is my future. It's where I belong. It's where Ben and I grew up, where he learned to be the man he is today." She shook her head. "That's where you're wrong, Jack. Things change. Ben and I have our own life now. We need room to grow, to live without feeling like we're living in the shadow of the past." "I'm not trying to hold you back, Clara," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I just want to be a part of this family. But you're pushing me out, and I don't know why." Clara's gaze softened for a brief moment, but the walls quickly went back up. "I don't want to fight with you, Jack," she said quietly. "But this is what's best. For Ben, for the kids, for all of us." I swallowed hard. The pain of hearing those words from her was almost unbearable, but I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "And if it means fighting for this house, fighting for my place here, then that's what I'll do." Clara didn't say anything in response. She just stood up and walked toward the kitchen, leaving me standing there, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this wasn't going to be easy. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back now. The more I prepared for the fight ahead, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about family, loyalty, and how far I was willing to go to keep what was mine. After Clara and I had that conversation, things felt like they shifted into high gear. The tension in the house was palpable, the quiet moments more loaded than ever before. I'd made up my mind to fight, and I wasn't going to back down. But with each passing day, the cost of that decision became clearer. Knew I was putting everything on the line, my relationship with Ben, my dignity, and possibly even my future. But at this point, I felt like I had no choice. I had spent my whole life building something, creating a legacy that I thought would be passed down through generations. And now, just because things had gotten difficult, they wanted to take it all. I kept my head down during the days that followed, avoiding direct confrontations with Clara and Ben. I focused on my own thoughts, trying to keep my emotions in check, while the weight of what was coming loomed over me. The house felt colder, emptier, like something precious was slipping through my fingers. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I wasn't ready to confront them just yet. I needed to prepare, to plan my next steps carefully. I spent hours looking through old documents, rereading the deed, and going over everything with Greg. The legal process was long and slow, but I was gaining some semblance of control. Greg had advised me to stay patient and not make any rash moves. The goal was to keep the pressure on, to force them into a position where they would have to listen. But it wasn't just the legal battle that was weighing on MIT was what would happen to my relationship with Ben. I couldn't shake the thought that he might never forgive me for this, that the fight to keep the house might cost me my son, and that hurt more than I could put into words. One evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, working through some paperwork, Ben walked in. I didn't hear him at first. His footsteps were soft on the old floorboards, but I looked up when he cleared his throat, standing there, hesitant, not sure of what to say. Didn't know what I was expecting. "But it wasn't this, Dad," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "We need to talk." I felt my chest tighten. This was at the moment I'd been dreading. He wasn't coming to apologize. He was coming to lay down the law, to tell me again that I needed to leave. I could see it in his eyes, the same determination that had been there the day he told me. I wasn't welcome, but I wasn't going to let him walk over me again. I put my pen down and looked at him. "What is it, Ben?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I know things have been hard, and I know I probably haven't handled this the best way, but this whole situation, it's tearing us apart. Dad, you and Clara, it's like you two are fighting over the same thing, and I don't know how much more I can take." "I'm not the one tearing this family apart," I said, my voice sharp, but I held back the anger. "I've tried, Ben. I've tried for years to be here for you, to make sure everything worked out, but now you and Clara are telling me I'm no longer wanted. How am I supposed to just accept that?" "I didn't want this, Dad," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I didn't want things to go this way, but Clara and I, well, we thought it was time to make a change, to move forward." I felt a sickening ache in my chest. "So, what? I'm just supposed to disappear? You want me to leave my own home because you're uncomfortable with me being here?" Ben flinched, but he didn't back down. "It's not just about you being here, Dad. It's about how everything's changed. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep trying to make everyone happy, because I'm not happy. And I'm afraid that if I don't make a decision now, we'll lose everything." I stood up slowly, feeling the anger build inside me. "I'm not the one who's tearing us apart, Ben. You and Clara are doing that. You've made your choice. You've chosen her over me. But I won't be treated like this. Not by you, not by anyone." His face crumpled as if he was struggling to hold it together, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of regret, of guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I never meant for it to come to this. Dad, Ben said quietly, turning to leave the room, but this isn't just about the house. It's about what's best for all of us. I watched him walk away, my heart sinking into my stomach. There was nothing left to say. He was gone, walking away from everything we had once shared. And as I stood there, watching the empty space where he had been, I realized the fight wasn't just for the house anymore. It was for my son's heart. The next day, Greg called to tell me that the court date was set. There was no more room for doubt. I was going to fight for my place in that house, for my dignity, for my family. But no matter how this ended, it would change everything. The night before the court hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the house around me silent and still. Every part of me felt heavy, like I was walking into a storm that I wasn't sure I was prepared for. I had fought for so long to hold on to what was mine, but now, it felt like the stakes were higher than ever. I had known for weeks that this day was coming. Ben and Clara had made their decision, and I had made mine. But as the hours ticked away, I couldn't help but think about everything I stood to lose. If I won, I would keep the house, but at what cost? The legal battle would only tear the family apart more. My relationship with Ben was already strained beyond repair. And Clara, well, Clara was no longer the woman I once welcomed into our family. She had become a stranger, someone who was willing to go to any lengths to get what she wanted. But I couldn't back down now. Not after everything. Not after the years I had spent building this house, raising Ben, trying to be a good father. This was my legacy, and I wasn't going to let it slip away without a fight. The morning came too quickly. I dressed in my best suit, something I hadn't worn in years, and I drove to the courthouse with my stomach in knots. The courthouse loomed in front of me, a cold, imposing building that somehow seemed more real than any of the emotions I was feeling. As I walked in, the weight of the situation pressed down on me. The air felt thick with tension, like a courtroom was where families went to die, not resolve their issues. I wasn't alone. Greg, my lawyer, was by my side, offering reassuring words that didn't quite reach me. He was confident, calm, prepared, but I wasn't sure any of that mattered. Nothing could prepare me for what was about to happen. We waited for what felt like hours before the doors to the courtroom opened. Ben and Clara entered, looking stiff, their expressions hard to read. Clara didn't look at me. Ben did, but only for a brief moment, before quickly looking away, as if seeing me hurt him. It broke me in a way I hadn't expected. I had raised that boy, and now, he couldn't even look me in the eye. We all took our seats, the lawyers exchanging pleasantries before the judge called the case to order. I could feel the coldness in the room, the sharp contrast to the warmth of my home, of the memories I had spent a lifetime building. As the judge began reading the case, it became clear that the battle was more than just about a house. It was about power, control, and family. Greg stood first, presenting the case clearly and confidently. He outlined the deed, the clause that protected my right to stay in the house, and how Ben and Clara's attempts to force me out were illegal. He kept his tone professional, calm, but there was an undercurrent of urgency in his words. He was fighting for me, but he was also fighting for the right to have my voice heard, to be seen as someone who deserved respect, not a burden. When it was Clara's turn, she stood with an air of practiced confidence. She spoke with the smooth, calculated tone I had come to know all too well. She argued that while the deed might protect me legally, the house was no longer suited for me, that the family dynamic had changed. She spoke of the new life she and Ben were trying to build, and how my presence was an obstacle to their future. She painted me as a relic of the past, a man who could no longer keep up, a man who had overstayed his welcome. As she spoke, I felt the anger rising inside me. Every word she said felt like a dagger in my chest. She didn't see me. She didn't see the man who had worked his whole life to make sure she and Ben had everything they needed. All she saw was an obstacle to her vision of the life she wanted. But then it was Ben's turn to speak, and my heart sank even further. I hadn't expected him to say much. He had stayed silent for most of the proceedings, his eyes downcast, but when he stood up, something in him had changed. For the first time in the whole process, he looked at me, really looked at me. "I know this isn't easy," he said, his voice shaking just a little. "I know my dad is not the person we want him to be right now, but he's still my father. He raised me, and I owe him that. I don't know how we got here, but I'm not sure this fight is the way forward. I don't know anymore." His words hit me like a flood, washing away the anger, the frustration, All I wanted was for him to be the son I raised, the one who would stand by me no matter what. But the truth was, I had lost him. The distance between us was too wide, and I didn't know if it could be bridged again. As the hearing continued, I sat there, listening to the arguments, but my mind wasn't on the case anymore. It was on Ben, on what had happened to the bond we had shared. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my son, my family. When the judge finally called for a recess, I walked out of the courtroom, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever was coming next, but one thing was clear. The fight had just begun, and the consequences would ripple through every part of my life, whether I won or lost. The days that followed the court hearing were the longest of my life. The waiting, the uncertainty, it gnawed at me, eating away at the fragile resolve I had built. I had fought for the house, for my place, for what I thought was right. But now, as I waited for the judge's final ruling, I began to question everything. Was this battle worth it? Was it worth losing Ben? Was it worth losing the family I had spent so long building? The phone call came on a Wednesday morning. It was Greg, my lawyer. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of hesitation that made my heart skip a beat. "Jack," he began, "I've got the ruling. The judge has made his decision." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "And the house is yours," Greg said. "The clause in the deed stands. You can stay." But he paused, clearly trying to soften the blow. "There will be conditions. You'll have to buy Ben and Clara out. They'll receive compensation for their share of the house, and you'll have to find a way to cover the costs. It's not a full victory, Jack. It's more of a compromise." I didn't know how to feel. The words "you can stay" should have felt like a relief, but instead, they just sounded empty. I had won the house, but at what cost? The financial burden of buying Ben and Clara out was more than I could manage without draining my savings. And more than that, there was the price of the emotional toll. The trust between us was shattered. The relationship with my son, gone, irreparably broken. I thanked Greg, but I could hardly focus on what he was saying after that. All I could think about was Ben, the look in his eyes as he stood in that courtroom, the words he hadn't said but had meant. He was just as lost as I was, caught between loyalty to me and to Clara, caught between two families he couldn't reconcile. When I walked back into the house, the weight of the decision still on my shoulders, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table. She didn't look up when I entered, her hands folded neatly in front of her. The kids were upstairs, playing quietly, oblivious to the storm that had been brewing in the house. Clara finally glanced up, her eyes hard, but there was something else in them too, something I couldn't quite place. "So, the judge ruled in your favor," she said, her voice almost too calm. I nodded. "I can stay, but it's not a complete victory. I'll have to buy you and Ben out." She didn't say anything at first, just looked down at the table, her fingers drumming lightly against the wood. "So, you're going to keep the house," she said finally, as though she was just stating a fact. "And we're supposed to leave." I could hear the bitterness in her voice, but I wasn't interested in arguing anymore. I didn't want it to be this way. "Clara, I didn't want to fight." She looked up at me then, her expression hardening. "You didn't want to fight. You think I wanted to do this. You think I wanted to come into this family and be the bad guy. Ben's torn, Jack. He doesn't know which way to turn, and you're making it worse." I took a deep breath, my mind swirling with all the emotions I'd been holding back. "I'm not making it worse, Clara. I'm fighting for what's mine. This house, it's everything to me. But I didn't think I'd have to lose my son in the process." Her face softened just a little, but the coldness never left her eyes. "It's not just about the house, Jack. It's about control. You've been holding on to everything for so long. You didn't see that Ben and I need to live our own lives. We need our own space." "I know that," I said, my voice rising, a mix of frustration and heartbreak. "But this isn't the way. We could have figured it out. We could have talked, worked it out, but instead, you pushed me out, and now we're all paying the price." Clara didn't respond. Instead, she just stood up, her eyes cold and distant. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Jack. It's over. The court decided. Ben and I are moving forward. You can do whatever you want, but I won't apologize for trying to build a life with my family." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, alone in the silence that followed. I looked around the kitchen, the house that had once felt like home, and for the first time, it didn't feel like mine anymore. It didn't feel like anywhere I belonged. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ben didn't come down from his room. The kids were still oblivious, laughing and playing in their own little world. But for me, the reality of the situation was sinking in deeper and deeper. I had won the house, but I had lost my son. I had lost my family. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the living room, I sat by the window, staring out into the yard where the maple tree stood tall, the same tree I had planted when Ben was born. But now, even that tree seemed different, more distant, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I had fought for the house, and I had won, but in the process, I lost something far more important, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back.